Welcome to Living in the Matrix. I'm Jonathan, and I'm left of center.
And I'm Rich, and I tend to lean a little bit more to the right. But the bottom line is together we try to look for the balance of what it means to be human in today's world.
All right, let's get started, everyone. Welcome to Living in the Matrix. I'm Jonathan. This is my co-host, Rich. Say hello, Rich.
Good to be back, gentlemen. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a very unique guest, someone I reached out to on Instagram. This is Dr. David Wardy. He runs Wardy Wellness. And what attracted me to Dr. Wardy was his understanding of energy, especially around kinesiology and how the body is an energetic movement. And so I want to dig into with him on this because I think this is going to be a fascinating episode on really learning how the body works energetically. And so, Doctor, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Jonathan, Rich, thank you for having me. Been listening to your podcast. Love it. I listened to one of them with your buddy, the chiropractor. And yeah, so me and my buddy have a podcast. I know how it goes. So love your all's podcast. Love what you're doing. Excited to be on the podcast today and tell my story. And good to meet you guys.
Yeah. So 100%. Let me start by saying,
emotions are priority, okay? We're conscious of some stuff. Let's see what comes up, man. So this is a place for your guide, Bram, a place. Your emotional guide is a place, buddy. Feelings of deep-seated grief feels like giving up. Laughing on the outside, but crying on the inside. Breaking the laws of love, breaking the laws of peace and joy. Resentment, hatred, or anger built up inside. So is it resentment, hatred, anger built up inside? So we're holding on to some anger, bud. Anger built up inside.
Know where it all is.
Okay, so think about that for me. Yeah, very good. So you got awareness, brother. Let's just make our way in to do some integration here. Go ahead and scan those colors top to bottom, Bram. Which one's sticking out at you, bud?
Green.
So stare at the green for me, brother. Green, I love. Say I love, Bram.
I love.
Green corresponds to heart, circulatory systems, arms, hands. Green balances openness, compassion, unconditional love, forgiveness, acceptance, contentment, nurturing, generous, harmonious, assertive, and heals loss. All the things you need to hear, right? Does that one smell like Fabuloso?
Help us understand what the hell you're doing, because most people won't have an idea of what you're doing.
So the unique part about what I do in my practice is I blend a number of techniques together based off what the individual needs on the table in front of me. And this journey has started from me as a structural based chiropractor, just coming straight out of school. And I'm completely out of the box.
Crack.
Oh man, you talk about, yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Crack.
We're
but that's how most people got their experience of it. You know,
Absolutely.
It's like they were racking, because it's a wild experience when someone goes pop, you know.
It's not like, wild, it's terrible.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's awesome.
Yes, no, it's horrifying. That feeling that you have, that anticipation you get when the side is fine, right? When you're on your back, it's fine. When you're on the side, it's fine. And then when that comes up, there's that level of anticipation, call it maybe about 3 degrees lower than a firing range, right? Where you know something's going to happen to your neck and you just got to relax as much as you can. I've never been able to lean into that situation. So let me help me understand why I need to do that more.
You know, it's interesting because I'm the same way, guys. Like, I have trouble relaxing for a cervical manual adjustment, you know, and it's funny, like, you look at chiropractic as a profession, and you guys just said it. Immediately people run to the rack 'em, crack 'em. I'm going to get cracked when I go into these guys. And, you know, as a profession, I feel like we're not doing a good job representing what we do because there's a large spectrum of different types of techniques across chiropractic. And it's kind of like that one thing you guys just talked about gets spread across the spectrum of every doctor that practices this type of medicine. And again, it's just because we can't make up our minds as a profession what we do. We don't want to just plant our flag in the sand and say, this is what we are, this is what we do. And we keep trying to blend in with medicine and do all these other things, right? So to get back to what we were talking about with this video is, you know, I started that way. I was in this box, and, you know, like talking about living in a matrix, you know, I grew up in a household where I still used conventional medicine. I was on a lot of antibiotics growing up, and, you know, we didn't eat the best in my household. My mom, right around my teenage years, started getting into more wellness type things and started taking better care of herself. And she started working with a herbalist, and, you know, she started going to a chiropractor. I mean, all these things started changing in early adolescence. And so I started getting a little bit of the whole wellness, taking care of yourself, self-care, you know, eating right, supplementing a little bit of this. My first experience with chiropractic was the rack 'em crack 'em. You know, that's all I knew. So, I mean, that was my story. I had a wonderful
And
chiropractor, rack 'em crack 'em. He did an amazing job. I was an athlete for most of my life. I played college football all the way through college. Chiropractic was a huge part of my life, but that was my picture. I was very much in a box. Okay. So what do I do in my videos? Well, I've been in practice 17 years, and I'm in a place now where I've almost completely let go of all of what I've learned in school. And I am approaching the person on the table from a completely different place than what I was taught and given my
Is it
licensure
a
for.
feel? How would you describe that transition? It sounds to me
Oh,
like
man.
you're literally feeling what's going on as opposed to looking at the textbook sitting on your shelf.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that experience.
So let's do this. We're going to have to go in reverse, guys. I'll tell you what it is I'm doing, and then I'll be able to tell my story afterwards. So where am I at
There
now?
you go.
So one of the things I always explain to our practice members is at no point during your visits am I intervening as a doctor. There's no intervention of me saying, I think that this is what needs to be done here. Doesn't happen in my clinic. Never happens. So from the moment a person gets on the table, I'm being guided by the body as far as what priority is in order of each step of what needs to be done. And what I do is I run through different subsystems that I run checks on. So I run checks on the field. So I check the actual magnetic field of the body. Then I run checks on, and I'll just tell you what they are. So I have active, passive, neurolymphatic, extremity, field, emotions, and fascia. And so
do you
I
feel like that's a
always,
full representation of the body?
so to where I'm at with the type of medicine I'm allowed to do in my scope, absolutely.
Yeah, good.
Because when we're on table time and I'm running through those particular subsystems, I'm just going in priority. So for example, if somebody's on the table and field comes up, that's where I start. And then after I'm done working on the field and I'm done with that layer, then I ask the body again, okay, now where's priority? And then I go to the next layer. And I don't choose what that layer is going to be. Sometimes fascias first, sometimes fields first,
So
sometimes
it's not linear. Okay.
the
Yeah,
body. Well, let's talk about that. The body is nonlinear.
truly.
So we have a
Yeah.
medicine, you know, we look at conventional medicine, everything is linear in conventional medicine. So that's immediately understand that conventional medicine can't be a holistic type of care because it's linear in nature. And the human body is nonlinear. A plus B, right, does not equal C. And I always have to explain this to people. So for example, let me give that example. So let's say priority is field on the patient. Okay. If I go and just assess and I see, oh, the fascia is wound up here. Oh man, this extremity needs some work. And oh man, the neurolymphatics are all clogged over here. And I assess and get a picture of what needs to be worked on, just as the patient is. The moment I go in and do one thing on the body, just one thing, everything changes and has to be reassessed again. So it's like cogs. The moment you move one cog, you're going to get all these other cogs moving and changing. So you're going to get a different result after you make one change. So everything will change. And what I teach a lot of my CAs and the people that work with me is I teach them how to read the body and map the body that way so that they're letting the body guide them. But your assessment, taking the time to assess and allowing the body to guide you really cleans the body up a lot faster and then gives the body what it's asking for. So again, I don't intervene. And then by the time I'm done, I've run through all these subsystems. And then the last thing I do is there anything else? And then if they test they're done, they're done. And I run through all those subsystems until they're clear.
But so let's compare and contrast, because in the rack and crack world, you're functionally moving something that produces a sound that has a feeling and it feels like something is relieved. Okay, that's the rack and crack thought that most people probably have an experience of. It's not wrong. It's just, it's the world most chiropractors have been in. And then there's your world, which says, no, this is a full body system that is energy, that is matter. How do we balance those in terms of all these signals? How did you get from there to there?
So, just to follow up on what you said about the hearing the crack, right? And thinking that that's the healing. A lot of people think that that crack means that the medicine's taking place. And what's interesting is the cavitation has nothing to do with the outcome. So I always tell people it's not about the crack. And that's a big misconception as it is, right? So, as again, I came out of school as a structural based chiropractor. So that was all I knew, right? It was you go in, you give them a good manual adjustment. There's different techniques we learned in school. We learned about 10 different techniques. We did get exposed to applied kinesiology and some other things that were more tonal techniques, which is a lot of what I'm doing now. But the basis of what we're taught in school is, like you guys are saying, manual adjusting. So coming out of school, that's what I did. I did a little bit of supplementation. I started up doing some cold laser therapy right out of school, using a little bit of like ion foot baths, wellness type things, but still very structural based. And it was interesting. I didn't get the results that I thought I was going to get coming out of school. You start seeing these people rolling through their doors and you start adjusting them, and then you don't see really improvements. They're still subluxated, that you're not really seeing the subluxation pattern changing much. And then you start looking at the body as a whole and you say, okay, well, what else is going on here? Because we're taught in school to focus on addressing the interferences, right? So we have 3 stressors the nervous system has to deal with. You have biochemical stress, mental, emotional, and you have physical stress. And the body's constantly, the nervous system's constantly having to deal with all this stress. It can't tell the difference what the stress is, but it has to adapt. And when we're not adapting well, we get dysregulated. And so, we're taught to just move bones to regulate the nervous system. And this can be effective. It can, and there's, there are ways, and there are good chiropractors that do these types of clinics where they're high volume, rack and crack them, and they're very successful, and people still get well. But when people are really sick, it's not enough. So here comes my story. So I was a doctor at 25, and about 2 years after I graduated, I got married and met my wife. And a year into our marriage, my wife got sick one day. It seemed like she had like an infection. Her lymph nodes got real swollen around her neck and different parts of her body. And so we took her to the doctor. They put her on antibiotics. And I mean, I'm still conventional medicine mind back then, okay? Got antibiotics, and she just started getting worse. Got to the point where she could barely breathe. She'd walk from like the living room to the bedroom and like be out of breath, like she was going to pass out. So we're like, what's going on? And within a 2-week period, I ended up having to take her to the hospital. Her hemoglobin level was at 3.5. She pretty much was almost like not carrying any oxygen anymore on her blood to her body. So that's why she couldn't walk. So she got deathly ill. We have no clue what's going on with her.
And young, right? Your wife is the same age as you are at this stage, right?
So I'm 27.
Like late 20s.
She's 4 years younger than me, so she's much younger than me at this point, because I'm only
Wow.
27. So I get hit like a year into marriage with my wife just like deathly ill, and like we're in the hospital, and I think I have no idea if she's gonna die. I mean, no joke. Like I'm holding her hand at the side of the bed, like from within a 2-week period of like she was fine, and then now she's like deathly ill. So I remember being in the hospital and asking the doctors over and over and trying to interpret her blood work, and you're in survival mode at this point. And I remember being in that state and saying, there's got to be, what is causing this issue? There's got to be something going on. And it was really sad, the responses I would get from the people that were taking care of my wife. It was just kind of like, wow, we don't know. Could be this, could be that, could be viral, could be this, but we don't know. So that journey took us to multiple doctors in town. She had like multiple blood transfusions to stabilizers. They threw tons of prednisone at her just to suppress her immune system. But again, they don't know, but they're just throwing stuff out to suppress her. And I'm not bad-mouthing conventional medicine. They saved my wife's life, and thank God that we have acute care for things like that. But what we ended up figuring out, and what they started to shed light on, which I kind of already figured out before they told us, was, well, it seems like she has some form of autoimmune disorder. It's called hemolytic anemia. Her body's attacking her red blood cells. So I would ask them, well, what's causing this? Like, what in the body could be causing this issue?
Yeah.
They didn't have a clue. So we ended up going to 2 Mayo clinics. We went to the one in Phoenix. We went to the one in Florida. And the only answer we got from them was, well, let's take her spleen out. And I said, okay, well, do you know that the spleen's causing the problem? And they're like, well, no, but that the chances are it could be. So I was like, so you just want to start cutting up my wife and guessing, huh? And that wasn't enough for me. So I told the doctor, no, we're not going to do that. I said, this is ridiculous. You guys have no clue and you're just guessing. It's almost like you're just throwing something on the wall to see what sticks. And I'm not going to do that with her. So I remember after we had already gone, this was the second Mayo clinic. We had already talked, we'd done multiple phone consults with doctors at Cleveland Clinic. And like, just, I mean, we're trying to figure out. I mean,
Cleveland Clinic's amazing. Very, very well. Yeah.
But no answers.
Mayo, right?
Yeah.
Right.
This is where people think you go to get answers, right? And we didn't get anything. We got no answers. So my wife's really down at this point after the second Mayo clinic. We're at the clinic still. We're like in their little foyer outside by the fountains after our appointments, and we're getting ready to leave. And you know, she's really down and upset. And I remember telling her, I looked at her and I said, babe, I was like, there is a cause. And I was like, I know there's something causing this and we're going to figure it out. We just don't know what it is right now, but we'll figure it out. And I was like, so you're going to have to hang in there. I was like, but you can't give up hope. I was like, we'll get there. And so this began our journey. So again, structural-based chiropractor, okay? I'm seeing like as high volume as I can. I'm 2 years in practice, right? Just trying to build my practice at this point. I haven't really gotten my practice real built up yet. And I immediately start looking for answers in natural medicine. So I said, you know what? I went to the conventional box. They didn't have anything for me. I'm going to go look at everything. And I'm not going to take anything out of, you know, this may not work. This could, I mean, anything could work. Let's just go see what's out there. So I immediately start going. I go and learn from a guy that I really wanted to learn from school. His name was Dr. John Brimhall. So he's a huge mentor of mine.
I know Dr. Brimhall.
Wonderful doctor. He's the first guy that I ran to, started learning from him, implemented all of his stuff. If you see Dr. John Brimhall's work, he does a little bit of kinesiology work. He does some emotional central integration. So that was like when I really started to get exposed more outside of just what I was trained in school. Because in school, we had a little bit of applied kinesiology. I took some basic modules, but I hadn't really dove into anything yet. So Dr. Brimhall was really my first exposure to doing more energy work, really starting to muscle test, really starting to dive into doing, you know, muscle response testing for supplementation and running people through his total health scan. And
when was this? At what
so this
time was that?
So it was like 2.5 years out of practice. So this was probably back in around 2009-ish.
That's exactly the same time. I think something was going on at that time because like that's when, so to our audience, there's a connection point here of that's when Dr. Hawkins really kind of started to really blossom and get a lot of attention. And I think we're now seeing the fruit of a lot of that because I think the world is waking up to mental health and how much it affects physical health. And you have this journey of discovering it's not just all matter, it's also energy. How was it, again, to shift from this harder construct to a more ethereal idea?
You know, when you're in survival mode, it's interesting what you're willing to do to try to get out of that state. You know,
that's a great point.
You know, we talk to patients all the time. Yeah, I mean, it opens your box. You know, when you have your health, you never think about it, right? But the moment you don't have it, that's all you think about. And even though I was fine health-wise, that's all I thought about because my wife was like literally chronically ill. And by the way, guys, she just kept getting worse. You know, we'll keep telling the story, but it's like she didn't stabilize. She just continued to unravel and continue to degrade in front of me while this is going on. But yeah, I mean, when I started doing Brimhall stuff, the beautiful part was when we started doing the work on Clarissa and giving the supplements, I saw her start to feel a little bit better. So that was something for me, right? It was like, okay, she wasn't feeling better with anything we were doing before. Now we're doing this. She's feeling a little bit better. So she's getting a little bit more energy. And
at that point, did the doctors have any diagnosis or any kind of
yeah,
idea?
it was just autoimmune hemolytic anemia. We don't know. Could be viral. Could keep going the rest of her life. It may stop in a year. Like, that was the answer we got. Just, I don't know. And
But does that feel like a technical term?
Buddy, I don't get hung up with labels and diagnoses because I don't see the body that way. You know, I understand there are people in this world that look at the body that way, and in medicine we have to label things for insurance purposes and all that. But like, to me, it's just like, yes, my wife's immune system's whacking out. There's a reason it's doing that. Let's try to figure this out. That's the way I saw it. You know, and at that point, different frame of mind. Okay. I mean, the way I see things now is a completely different look now compared to where I was then and the way I was seeing things, you know. But, you know, to answer that question, guys, when you're in survival mode, I mean, the box just opens. It's just like,
yeah,
it's almost like you're asking the universe, like, please guide me.
Amen. Yeah.
You're just saying, please guide me and show me something so I know where to go.
Well, what you're bringing up is something interesting that happens a lot on missions trips. When people are in foreign countries, they don't know the culture, they don't know the language. They're very out of their comfort zone. There tends to be a lot more miracles and a lot more amazing things that happen. What's that? Minimalism?
Liminalism.
Liminal. Yeah, the liminal space, right?
Space.
Yeah. So the encouragement, the ability to release all of your own suppositions and being at almost the mercy of the universe or the divine or whatever, the Holy Spirit, if you would.
Like,
right?
show me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Show me the way here, because I mean, we've been down this path so many times where the physical, I mean, Neo is battling Morpheus, and he goes, do you think that's air you're breathing right now? Right? They're doing the construct, right? And like, he seems tired, and he's like trying to figure out why he's not able to beat Morpheus, right? He goes, do you think that's what's going on? Right? And you have to quell that pre, predefined vision, whether it's textbooks of knowledge or whether it's your knowledge of your environment, and you've got to release that. Yes.
Yeah, it has to be a canon, an idea. And the chiropractic world had a lot of elements in Eastern ideas, but it had a hard science to it, you know?
Well, a big thing a lot of people forget about chiropractic is D.D. Palmer was a magnetic healer before he invented chiropractic. He was an energy healer.
Yes.
But nobody wants to talk about that in our profession.
Sean told us that.
Yeah, and it's funny how nobody talks about that, right? Like, we're just stuck on this physical move bone stuff. But yeah, I mean, he was an energy healer before he started doing that stuff. But Rich, you beautifully put that, man. Yeah, you beautifully framed that, buddy. Like, it's the power of the nervous system, man, and the state it puts you in: fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, some people will freeze in those moments, and they don't do anything in life. They freeze. Some people will flight, right? They just roll in a ball, and that's it. And then there's the fighters, and I'm in the fight mode, man. It was just like, I'm gonna fight for my wife's life here. I'm not gonna let this be our reality. And so, yeah, I mean, the box is completely open there. It's like, just show me. Mm-hmm. And you said it awesomely, because I think the canon was honestly the way you put it is, yeah, that has to happen. And it's sad because this happens with a lot of people with healing when it comes to healing. They have to hit rock bottom. Something really bad has to happen to create that shift of consciousness. But in my story, which you guys will see, it's created something beautiful in our lives. Like, where I'm at now, the beauty in what I have now because of this story, which we'll talk about as we get down that road, though, that was the beginning right there. I mean, we're talking about the very beginning.
Yeah. I only wanted to interject one more thing, because one of the stigmas against the chiropractic or the pharma or cognitive, behavioral cognitive therapy is when you keep going back and it's 12, 15, 20 years down the road and you're still got this support system and you haven't broken free of it, that's not healthy either, right? So the stigma of, like, you hear, I knew a guy when I waited tables, this guy would go in every week, and it was like 3 years later. It's like, dude, what are you doing? I mean, isn't there supposed to be a path out of this process where you're not in pain anymore? He's basically like a pusher for you. And religion has the same problem, right? You can be free, or you can hold on to this idea of walls and boundaries and not breaking free. So let's continue the journey and help us understand how your model is different, and where we need to get to a level where those kind of stigmas don't take place anymore.
So, from Brimhall's stuff, was doing more energy work. Okay. And then I kind of mastered his stuff after about 4 years, and I was just ready for the next thing. And one of his crew introduced me to Dr. Dan Pompa. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. Dan Pompa's work. So Dr. Dan Pompa's claim to fame is he does a lot of cellular detox. So Clarissa had only gotten so far in her healing with Brimhall, and I knew there was something else, right? So I knew that detox was a big key for my wife. I knew there was something going on where we needed to look into that. And I learned a ton from Dr. Dan Pompa. He didn't just teach me about how to effectively get the body detoxed. I mean, I had been using all different kinds of detoxes in my practice for years that just didn't have really any effect on anybody. I didn't see any big changes in people's health. I wasn't seeing what I wanted to see with these types of programs. At that time in the industry, there was all kinds of stuff being thrown around, detox, 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 but with honestly just really crappy results that would come out of it when you would sell these people on these programs. You just didn't really see the results. They were short-lived. So when I met Dan, Dan's claim to fame is he got sick himself. He had mercury toxicity from getting dental amalgams taken out. And he got horrible anxiety, like suicidal, like just whacked out. And so he tried all these things and nothing worked. And then finally he figured it out with the way that he went around this process. So he developed something called true cellular detox. So I went to learn that from Dan. Me and my wife both got certified and learned how to do that in our practice, and we did it ourselves. And that was another layer for Clarissa. But the big piece of that process was one of the hidden pieces with my wife was her gut, believe it or not. So just to kind of shine some light there, she was completely asymptomatic of gut issues. She didn't get bloating after she ate. She didn't have constipation or diarrhea, like normal bowel movements, like not like completely asymptomatic. But she was suffering from a massive leaky gut. And it wasn't until it got more severe during her autoimmune problems that we started to see this. So then these food intolerances started setting in with gluten, and like she wasn't, digesting well, and she would bloat and swell after she ate, and like she wasn't handling food anymore. And so right along this time, we met Dan, and we started learning how to work on leaky gut and repair the gut and the microbiome. And we got into block fasting. He taught us, when I was with Dan's group, we were probably ahead of the US by at least 3 or 4 years of doing block fasting and water fast. We were doing 5-day water fasts like probably 6 years ago,
5 day.
not longer.
No bone broth, just pure water for
just
5 days.
Pure water. Pure water. I've taken my practice members through 5-day block fasts with water. It's beautiful. You get amazing amount of healing. You get stem cell burst. You get autophagy. It's a very powerful detox. And here's the thing. When you effectively want to fast the body properly, there's a process there. We ramp you in over a 7-week process. But man, a 5-day water fast, if you have not experienced that, it's life-changing. It will reset the body in so many ways. So we did that. And, and so again, Clarissa just getting better and better, little by little, right?
What's the time frame up until this point? How long has it been?
Let's see. We were about with Brimhall, it was like 2.5 years, and 4 years passed by, right? And so that'd been, I don't know, there's 6 years that she's sick, and then we're with Dan, and so we're still getting better. Like she's not
a little bit better, not like she can't, breathe across the living room.
It wasn't a switch, but like she's healing. Like she's not, because let me tell you where she was. So I told you guys she was getting worse, right?
Progress.
So when she was bad coming out of the hospital, guys, they stabilized her, but then this is what rolled out. She couldn't get out of bed in the morning because she wasn't getting good sleep. So like literally exhausted, like no energy, like hard to get out of the bed in the morning and just get about her day. She started getting these like welts all under her skin, all over her body, and her lymph nodes would swell up on and off, and her tongue would swell. And then she started getting like candida issues here. And like you can think of everything that the immune system could whack out on. She'd get inflamed. Her joints would swell up like balls everywhere.
Like Joe.
It was horrible. Like brain fog, digestive problems, like horrible fatigue. I can't sleep. I mean, just then depression sets in, right? Because you feel horrible all the time. So I just watched my wife over this period. She was getting worse. Brimhall kind of pulled her out of that a little bit. Okay. And she had better energy. We started getting her sleeping a little bit better. Her gut was still kind of not great, but like she was somewhat functional when we were with Brimhall stuff. She just still wasn't getting better. She would flare. You see flares with autoimmune. And then we went to Pampa stuff. And again, we were at Pampa for about 3 years. So like now we're about 9 years, like 7, 8, 9 years down the road. While I'm with Pampa, she's still healing. We're not having any issues with like the energy anymore. Her flares are very, 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 very set apart now versus being like every like 6 to 8 weeks. She can sleep better. I mean, she's somewhat getting a normal life. So what happened on the back end of Clarissa's autoimmune journey is all of the stuff that she had at the beginning, we pretty much wiped out by year 10. It took 10 years to help her to fix this.
Damn.
But by year 10, all the stuff that we pretty much started with and that she had on and off was pretty much gone. So like energy wasn't an issue. Sleep really wasn't an issue. She didn't inflame anymore. But man, her skin, like right around year 6 in the 10-year journey, her skin started doing some funny stuff. So then we started seeing eczema and psoriasis and like just her ears would get all fluid, would start leaking out of her ears. I mean, like folds of her skin would just like lesions. I mean, scalp would like horrible flakes, seborrheic, stuff on the face. I mean, really bad skin conditions, but it wasn't the autoimmune. So apparently, after we saw a lot of immunologists and we looked at this thing, the prednisone that they had put her on for the first like 6, 7 years of her autoimmune massively destroyed her immune system. Prednisone long term will make things 100 times worse. And we didn't know. Okay. It was just one of those things we didn't know. And she had been on a high dose. We immediately had got her to a very, very low dose of prednisone to where she was almost just taking like 5 milligrams a day. And then for like 3 or 4 years, she would only take it if she had flares to try to calm things down. But unfortunately, that journey to stabilize her caused a long-term skin problem, and immune just whacked her skin out, all kinds of allergies. So now we're just dealing with allergies. And so, at the back end of her journey, a lot of this stuff's gone that she was having to deal with on a daily basis, but it was just the skin stuff. So and again, thank God for conventional medicine. We finally were able to help her with her skin because her skin got so bad, guys, about 2-3 years ago that her whole body looked like an open lesion and she lost like probably about 2/3 of her hair. And so
we ended up Job, right, Jonathan?
Oh, man,
do you guys ever, this is crazy. This is left field, but there's this passage in the Bible that talks about an affliction, right? I mean, it feels like what your wife went through is like a fucking demonic or spiritual affliction. I mean, certainly the body's part of it, but it seemed like there was just an assault, like nonstop of a different matter. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I got to ask, what were you feeling at the time?
Man,
as a guy, as a guy, it's okay to be like, that's a brutal journey, bro.
Oh, absolutely. I had my highs and lows. You watch your wife suffer like that. And when she was at some of her lowest times, like it takes the life out of you guys. Like I was still having to get up, go to work, like try to like support my family, like be there for my child, be there for my wife, like put on the happy smiley face when I know my wife's in bed and can't get out of bed and is suffering. I mean, it's hard, but you're able to do. But, one of the things I would always share with my wife, I said, look, I know I'm not physically going through what you're going through, but every piece of me as a human being, every piece of energy and my soul feels the pain and the suffering that you're feeling. Yeah. Like I am going through that with you. And I tell her, understand that. Like I'm with you on this journey with that, and that I'm not immune to that stuff. And we had our ups and downs, and it's interesting to look back at, and we'll talk a little bit about her journey with healing, and then we'll wrap it all up with even the medicine we had to use. But Clarissa had a big healing journey. It's funny how these types of things in your life sometimes will shift you to have to raise that consciousness and have to figure out what needs to shift in me for me to get well. And we both had these journeys because of her pain, her suffering. I have grown and evolved as a human being immensely because of my wife and her journey. And we look back on it now.
That sensitivity is probably affecting your work. That empathy and sensitivity and just that experience. I can only imagine how helpful that's been for you, your journey.
Well, let's just, we can talk about that. So, when Clarissa, like 4 years in our journey, when she was sick, and because we figured like we didn't get any answers, right? We started noticing that there was a lot of other people that were in the same boat as her. Like they weren't getting answers either. So as I'm learning stuff to help my wife, I'm implementing it into my practice over this 10-year period. And my practice is evolving and changing like every year, because I was probably hitting up at least four to six seminars a year and conferences to go learn from doctors and naturopaths and just whoever was out there talking about different things in my industry that I knew could help heal my wife. I was going out and I was learning it. And as this was happening, it was slowly evolving and morphing my practice. When it got to the point where all my practice members were like, oh, we can't wait till you come back to see what you implement and change in the clinic. Like they like that I'm evolving and growing these things. They don't like it. Like they're always waiting for the next thing every year, because everything that we do always evolves, right? So as we're evolving and healing and Clarissa's getting better, the practice is evolving, and I'm helping more people. As a doctor, things I never thought I'd be ever able to help people with, I started being able to help people with. I had people coming into me with things that thought, oh my God, I can't believe they're coming to me for this, but then I'm able to help them for this. And then as a doctor, things that I like, again, I'm in this box of what I'm going to see as a chiropractor for my life. And then that box just starts doing this. Once I start, broadening that lens a little bit to help my wife and changing my practice, our practice changed. So we started getting more patients like my wife. We started having people that had autoimmune disorders come in. We had people coming in that were suffering, they can't sleep, or they have digestive problems, or brain fog, or anxiety, depression, or I have immune issues, or have, that's the type of stuff that started rolling in. And I stopped just getting, oh, my back hurts. And, now, full circle, I don't get a lot of the structural stuff anymore. We still get it, but we don't ever talk about pain or focus on pain in my clinic, because that's not what healing is. So we're in a place now where I went from a pain-based chiropractor.
Wait, hold on a second. Doctor, hold on a second. Unpack that, because I think that's a very big statement you just made.
Well, I'm going to unpack it. So I don't chase pain in my clinic. And that's one of the first things I tell everybody. If you are coming into me because you want to have a change in your symptoms from before you came into me to before you left, like all symptom based, that's the way you're thinking, then this is not the practice for you. I have an agreement that people sign before they come into my clinic. Yeah. The understanding of my patient agreement is that we are upgrading your human operating system. And there is growth and evolution and more bandwidth as we do this, and your ability to regulate yourself better. And this will bring more opportunities and changes in consciousness.
It's human performance.
And your actions and absolutely, it's human performance. But it's beyond that, guys. Like, it's changing consciousness in people. You're raising bandwidth in their nervous system and in their energy system so that they can actually tackle more of life and not have to be in survival mode. Because most of the people that come into me, they're in survival mode when they come into me. And my job is
let's talk about 2009. Yeah, 2009, when things started getting really bad. What was going on in the economy, right? We were in the pit of the Great Recession.
Mortgage crisis.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. There was a lot of stress, a lot of freaking out. When after 9/11 happened, there was so much sickness in the New York City area, not just because of the initial physiological and the affront of the destruction, but waves of people were sick because they were on a fight or flight. Their cortisol levels were through the roof. Their adrenal system was overdrive. They couldn't heal. They couldn't sleep, and they couldn't do that. And so that, I think, you're nailing it. I mean, when you've got a broken computer, there could be so many things. It could be a virus. It could be the storage. It could be memory. It could be a couple other things. And you have to look at it holistically, like you're saying, in order to get to the root cause of it. Yep.
So yeah, we explain that. So when people come in, like, it's very important that I explain to them right off the bat, like, look, I'm hearing what you're telling me of what's wrong with you, But the reality is we're going to go and ask your body right now what's going on. And your body is going to tell me and you what's going on, because you and me don't know what's going on. And honestly, you only have so much awareness. And the awareness of people and their bodies is on a very, very wide spectrum. You have some people that are very aware of their body. They're very perceptive based. They have a very innate sense of what's going on with their systems. And then you have people that are completely clueless. So if I'm a doctor and I'm just listening to somebody talking about all their symptoms and what they think is going on, they could lead me all the way out here in left field, and that has nothing to do with what's going on. So I understood a long time ago with the tools that I was learning to assess the body and to get answers from the body, that the body can guide you if you know how to talk to it, if you know how to ask the right questions, if you know how to challenge it, if you know how to tap into it. And so that's what I've developed over my career. Over like 17 years of doing this type of work, you start to build more intuitiveness. Because you're putting your hands on people all day. And when you're tapping into people's energy systems, whether it's the nervous system, the electric body, or you're in the field and you're in the magnetic body, you're going to start to feel things over time because you do it every day. And so your intuitiveness.
Well, it's your intention.
Absolutely.
As a doctor, your intention is to heal. And when you're feeling that healing going on in people, it's going to affect you.
And so you build more intuitiveness, and you build more of this, the way me and my wife talk about it now, because my wife's a yogi and she's a level 2 Reiki practitioner, and she works with me in the clinic, and she's our TCD specialist. She does all the lifestyle medicine counseling. So talk about someone who's healed and now she's helping people that used to suffer like her. But we talk about it like this. She says, it's interesting watching you work now. She says, it's almost like you're picking up the frequency of where the imbalance is in the body as you're mapping things. She's like, I'm watching you.
The patterns.
She's like, because I always tell her, well, I feel it, because she sees it. And she's always telling me, well, I can see it. And I was like, well, I don't see it. I feel it. And then sometimes it's like somebody's just talking in my ear throughout the whole visit and just tells me where to go. But it's like you're just tuning in. You're picking up on the patterns, the energetic patterns on these different layers of the body. And when you're doing this all day and you're working on these layers, you start to notice what things feel like. And so again, just back to no, go ahead, guys.
I was going to say, if you look at like an acupuncturist, they've got a chart of all the pressure points, and they can tell you where this foot thing helps, like here, or XYZ. Those are all things that are supposed to be structured. And also, even though it's Eastern medicine, they're looking at pressure points in certain things, certain herbs to do certain things.
But it's very fixed. It's observable.
Yes, exactly. What I'm saying is, it seems to me you're going beyond that. You're actually doing something that there might be something out, because guess what? Everybody who goes to the chiropractor, not everybody's going to get healed, right? And everybody's probably gone and hoping they've been fully healed, and it's not that. So where do you actually tap into what is kind of a consensus, and then where do you draw some more intuition, right? This is the beautiful thing about the brain, right? And how a holistic process works, where you're relying on good best practices, like how to drain the lymphatic system. There's certain herbs you can take which are naturally good for that, versus, well, you know what? We've been through this path. We've got the symptoms that technically have this, but we've got something else going on here. Help us understand how you work through those kind of that dichotomy, that duality.
Well, guys, it's interesting when you don't know how to use these tools and you don't use them as a doctor. It's interesting what you think is the problem. I look back in time and so when I wasn't doing this type of work, and the way that we're taught in school to assess the body and go through like range of motion checks and these types of orthopedic tests, very mechanical, structural, matter-based tests, okay? And then we're taught imaging, which is great. Imaging can tell you some stuff. We're taught a little bit about blood. But in all honesty, when you're using only those types of tools, think about this. All you're doing is looking at the effect. Yeah. This is very important, okay? You're just looking at the effect. And the effect could be like a million things. Really think about this for a second. The effect could be a million things.
So what are the effects of like depression? Like you could have 14 different things that that your body, your emotions, your range could be as a result of depression.
Right.
But you're still getting out, you're missing the root cause. Yes.
Yeah, think about it. We're a system of systems, right? Every system has to be in rhythm. The whole's in a rhythm. But what's throwing off the rhythm? It could be mental, emotional stress. And that could be throwing everything into a whirlwind. But if I'm just focusing and throwing supplements at this person and putting them on a diet and telling them to exercise, and the whole time their brain and their mind is just stuck in mental stress and doesn't have the capacity, I may start moving the needle in that person's healing, but it's going to be very, very, very slow, and they're probably not going to be successful in feeling much better because I'm not where I need to be. And then you have some people that maybe that is the case. Maybe it is biochemical stress. The mind's fine, but they just trash their body and they don't take care of themselves. They eat like crap. They drink too much. They do recreational drugs. Maybe I do need to focus and clean this up, right? Or maybe it's just physical. Maybe they have trauma from physical accidents that need healing, right? But then we have a breakdown of all these systems that need to be supported to allow that healing. But here's the thing. If you're not taught to ask the body and the body to show you where a priority is and where you really need to focus your energy, then you're just spinning your wheels and you're not doing much for that patient. They're not going to heal very quickly, and you're really not going to see the results you want to see. So what I saw over my journey when my medicine changed and when I start tapping in the way I do now is I get to the priority of the root of the system in their body or systems that are struggling that need help. And I already know where I need to focus my energy with the tools and the medicine I have to help them heal. And it's interesting. I have a body ecosystem hierarchy in my clinic on a poster. I got this from Dr. Perry Nicholson, if you guys have ever heard of the Lymph Mojo guy. Amazing guy. You guys got to check him out. Stop Chasing Pain. Learned a lot from him about the lymphatic system. He taught me a ton of stuff.
I like that idea of not chasing pain.
Stop Chasing Pain.
Because
yeah, that's his website. Yeah.
It's a mindset shift.
Well, pain doesn't come from the body, guys. It comes from the brain. That's just brain neuroscience. That's neuroscience. Like, we understand now that the brain tells the body where to experience the pain. It's not coming from the body, right? So if you're chasing pain patterns all day, you're going to get nowhere.
Yeah.
So where was I? So we were talking about, this is all stuff that helped my wife, guys, because I had to figure out what was root cause for her, right? So as I'm learning these tools...
At this point, you had not come to a significant conclusion other than it's an autoimmune disease. That search has kind of gone. Is that where you're at?
Pretty much. Like, we know it's just an immune problem, but we're finding little by little, like, oh, digestion's an issue. We need to address this. Like, this is a root cause. Her gut is causing a problem.
And for our listeners that don't understand immune disease, help them understand that it's not like a broken arm where you have a fixed problem. An autoimmune can have multiple symptoms, right?
So, my journey with autoimmune went from seeing it in a box and then now really understanding what it is, and you see it very different. But so autoimmune, the way I explain it to people is it's not a disease. It is basically a dysregulated immune system. Okay. So what it is, the immune system cannot balance itself. It can't come back in homeostasis. And you have two types of autoimmune type patients, and then there's a large spectrum of problems that can develop from these two types. And some of these people, they show autoimmune from birth. They have allergies from the time they're little kids, asthma and constant mucus, and they struggle all the way in their early adolescence, early 20s, constantly showing an immune picture from the time they're born. And then you have others that don't show any of that picture, and then it springs up later in life, like maybe in their 20s or 30s, and slowly starts to show and kind of show its head later. And the funny thing about autoimmune, when the immune system starts whacking out, is it will pick different parts of the body and different systems and tissues to start affecting and create its dis-ease in the body. So in my wife's picture, for example, it was autoimmune hemolytic anemia was the label they want to put it because it was affecting her blood. Other people, like in Hashimoto's, it's their thyroid, and you have people that have like Addison's and Cushing. I mean, the list goes on, guys. There's like hundreds of autoimmune problems because there's tons of labels, but at the end of the day, it's the immune system is not functioning properly. So yeah, I mean, you look and we're looking for these root causes, and these tools are helping me figure out, okay, root cause. We know this is an issue. Her body is telling me this is an issue. Let's focus here. So we focused on her gut. And then we started to notice, like I said, her immune system. So we started doing immune type based therapies with her to try to get her immune system balanced out. And then the brain, we started working with her nervous system more. And I'll get into like some of these things in a second of how that was a huge game changer for her. If you ask Clarissa what was probably the biggest thing that helped her just feel better and helped her regulate, it was NIS. It was neurological integration system, which is one of the systems that I use. But all of these tools and knowing where to go to use them are not, I mean, a tool is only good as the person using them and know how to use them, right? There's a ton of tools out there. I teach my CAs all the time, guys, this is a tool, but it's only so good as the person holding it. And so that's a doctor, right? We have all these tools, but if you don't know where you need to use them and where's priority and root, then your patient's not going to really see that healing like they need to. So I'm in a place now with my medicine that I have the tools to find that root cause. And when I'm able to tap into somebody, we're able to assess two things. We're working on the magnetic body first in the field, which really tells me a lot of things. It tells me a lot of things that are going on in the electric body, so neuroscience type stuff. If you look at modern neuroscience, I can map all that for you in the body based off what is going on in the field, the electromagnetic field of the body. And so we work on the field, and you know, the interesting thing when you're working in the field is it's purely the thought field. So this is where like all of our thoughts, emotions, the mental aspect of who we are, but this is what's influencing the way that the energy is moving through the physical body. So think of them like streams. You guys were talking about ancient Chinese medicine, right? So all those streams you see, those meridians, think of it like water flowing, energy flowing through these streams, right? And it can't be stagnated. It can't be stopped. That chi, right?
Blocked.
That prana has to move. But that is all influenced by the field. So there are answers in the field.
Are you talking about the unified fields?
I'm talking about your
No, I
field.
think energy field.
I'm talking about your electromagnetic field.
An energy field,
Yeah, your electromagnetic field. So what I tell people all the time is there are a lot of answers for your health in the field. And this is in the thought field because a lot of people, you're scrambled.
But here's the question, doctor.
Yeah.
Here's the question, and I'm gonna playing devil's advocate. Actually, it's more of most people don't even know that part exists.
No, I know.
And I think we're coming into a place in culture and time where we're beginning to recognize, no, we are an energetic system. We're not just a mental system.
The idea of an aura, too, right? People are starting to understand the idea of an aura, not necessarily chakras, but there's
it's not.
Hey, you've got good vibrations, you got good energy, right? Those are just all kinds of semantics for kind of the same thing, but it's still very superficial, I think.
We need a healthy language around it in discussion.
Yeah, but guys, physics has proved all this stuff. You know, it's funny depending on who you talk to.
But I think the world is catching up to physics, though.
Yeah, but it's funny. The physics is there, the science is there, and we know this. The body's electromagnetic. We've known this for a very long time. The body's an electromagnet. It's just the way we function.
Yes.
And we're finally have tools now that are verifying presence of our electromagnetic field. This actually has been tested. You know, at the conference I went to this past year for NIS, Dr. Alan Phillips actually showed there's these neuroscientists and these, what are these guys called? They're like some kind of neurobiologists, and they basically built a machine and they hold it about 5 inches up off the head like this, and it measures the electromagnetics coming off the brain. And so we actually are mapping and finding and able to measure presence of this field. And that's what I work with all day. I work with the electromagnetics around the brain and the body to bring balance back to the field and then also to the electric body. But this, I mean, like you guys are saying, when a lot of people see this, like on my Instagram, right? They watch my videos and they're like, whatever, man. But I love that because it's kind of like,
oh my God,
I love it. I love when
from an absolute,
I love skeptics.
Outside of this field. No, of course, Jonathan. Yeah, if you're not coming at this from any kind of lens,
I'm too progressive, I guess. I don't know. I'm just.
Well, you've got a very open mind. You come to it with a blank slate.
No, I come with an awareness of Dr. Hawkins. So
that's true. Yeah, and dispense that, Dr. Joe. This is Dr. Joe's, category too about using the mind to heal the body.
Absolutely, all stuff I work with all day.
People are beginning to become conscious of their own consciousness, and I think, like you said, the energetic system, the field, is what people are like. I think people would rather ignore it, and it's easier to ignore it in the short term.
There's got to be a point where you get to a level where you can't ignore it anymore. You know.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think we're in that transition right now. I think people are getting to where they can't ignore it anymore because they're understanding what we're
Yes.
doing isn't working. And so they're willing, like we were saying earlier today, to look outside the box because they're like, you know what, this isn't working
Yes.
for me. For
That's what
why not?
suffering does.
Everyone's talking about this other stuff. Let's see what's here, right? And I was the same way, guys. You have to understand that. You're looking at a guy that was like this coming out of school in a box.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had something that pushed me out of that box. Not everybody has that. But I found nothing but opportunity, growth, and evolution as a human being for myself, for my wife, for my family, for my
Nice.
practice, for my community, for my town. And there's thousands of people benefiting it now because I learned something and I had a pain to purpose type journey. So my life has led me from this journey to learning tools that I've been able. There's things, guys, that I've been able to help people with now that I never in a million years would be able to help them with if I hadn't been on this journey.
Give us one example that kind of blows your mind and like, this is what I get to do.
Oh, buddy, every case that walks through my clinic almost is an example. So I see things. I get people that come into me, for example, they have like 20% energy. They can't. They're just excessively fatigued. They can't sleep. Horrible digestion. I mean, for decades. I mean, just the severity of the cases that walk into me, and the fact that I can sit in front of that and not be afraid and say, I can help this person. I'm going to get them better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is the example. I have people, I'll give you, let's just go in the last couple of weeks. I had a guy come in, he had a stroke 2 years ago, completely went numb in his left hand. Okay, can't feel his hand. The first NIS visit, during the middle of the visit, his feeling came back in his hand. 2 years, no feeling in his hand. Had another guy who's had pain down his leg, couldn't feel his foot. He has almost drop foot. After his first NIS, the numbness stopped on his foot, feeling came back in his foot. Stuff that I have patients that have been to doctors for decades, haven't gotten well. They come into me, I'm able to help them get well because of the way that I'm doing things. Now, that's not to say I can't fix everything. And there are people that I turn away because I tell them I can't help you because some things are out of my control to help. But just the severity of the case and the things that I'm able to help guide people with in their healing now, that is the beauty of what it is now. Because
Gets you up every day.
to be a doctor, to be
amazing.
confident that you can help those types of people is awesome, because that wasn't me a long time ago. And there are doctors now that they get scared of those types of patients. They'll push them out the door because they know they can't help them.
Are those so in a traditional rack and crack sense, are those the chronic patients that never heal?
So these are the ones yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Jonathan. I'm the guy that everybody goes to after they've tried everybody else and nothing worked. I'm the last guy.
Isn't that your journey? That's almost ironic.
It is ironic, but yeah, I mean, literally, I hear that all the time. They look at me, they're like, Doc, I've gone everywhere. You're the last guy. I'm hoping you can help me.
Yeah.
I get that all the time.
And you're like, I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah. I was like, buddy,
and that's a good place to be as a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you. What would you say to yourself coming out of college? Like, you get to sit with yourself for a beer for a half an hour. What would you tell yourself? Because here's the thing, my best friend lived your journey. I'm watching your case, and he didn't have the same wife case, but his journey of discovering chiropractic work changed, and it's interesting to watching you have. What would you say to yourself? What would you?
What
would you listen?
Myself,
would you enlighten?
I would tell myself to not be afraid of the unknown.
That's awesome.
There you go.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're in school like that, right, and you're being taught and being told this is what it is, you want to do good, right? You want to make your grades, you want to become a good doctor, but it's almost like you get forced in this box of, I'm going to stay in the known of what they're telling me. This is what we know, right? And the reality is we don't know. We don't. We know a little bit, but like I said, that piece I learned in school, it's like this big, and I don't use any of it. I use very little. I use the foundation of my anatomy, my physiology, my biochemistry, my radiology, all the basics that I got licensed to be a doctor. Yes, I use those things, But as far as like the tools I use to assess and treat and like help people with now, I don't really use much of those anymore, aside from if I have to give a manual adjustment, I know how to do that. But like not much of what I learned in school is used on a daily basis anymore, aside from like the understanding of like neuroscience and some physiology. The rest
What do you
is
tell
all energy.
people?
It's all energy.
What do you tell people when they come in wanting pain management?
So I don't really get a lot of those, but when I do, I just tell them, I say, look, we don't chase pain in this clinic. And I tell them, I say, pain
How do you
doesn't
help them
come.
understand the distinction there? Because I think you can draw them in, but I'm sure a lot walk away because it's a scary journey to go beyond.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, yeah. Let's talk about that. So one of the things I explain right away is I talk about the body has vital function demands. So I always educate. Education is a big piece in our practice. And so I say, look, you have 4 vital function demands. The very first one is communication. Then we have resources, response, and reactivity. Those things have to happen effortless in your body all the time. And your master system, your brain and spinal cord, is that communication. It's your broadcasting system. It's that streaming service. It has to signal to over 70 trillion cells all day long. And that can't be interrupted. There can't be any interference to that communication. Otherwise, we can't utilize resources. Your body can't have a proper response, and you can't have reactivity. And then I teach them the different layers of their nervous and their energy systems, and I explain what each one does and how they all work together to give them regulation and what I call coherence, basically a regulated nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tell them, these are the things we're going to look at on you. We're going to look at adverse mechanical cord tension, and explain what cord tension is in the spinal column and how that's what creates the subluxation pattern in the passive system, which is the vertebra, which is why I don't like rack 'em crack 'em chiropractic, because you're not addressing cord tension. And that's why chiropractic gets a bad name, is because chiropractors go and adjust people without unwinding the spinal cord. And that's when an adjustment hurts and hurts somebody. The other thing we talk about is the fascia. My understanding of the fascia is very different than what science wants to say it is, because when you're in the US, science wants to tell you it's one thing, but you go on the world level and they think of the fascia very differently. So I believe the fascia is another communication network, and it processes data. It moves light energy through the body. That's where the 4th phase of water takes place in our body, is through our basically extracellular matrix. So I talk about and explain the fascia in a very different way. It's 40% of our force control and our tensegrity aspect of our bodies, but it is another communication system that moves faster than our nervous system, and it processes information. This is a very important system because it touches every other system in the body. And my belief in the fascial network is that chronic disease starts there. Because the moment
it's not fun though to work in the CMT. I mean, I've had a CMT work on me, and that's not as much fun as getting a deep tissue massage. It's a lot more, and it takes a lot. It's not passive. You've got to be actually involved, right?
Right. So we do a ton of fascia work. I'm a big fan of John Barnes' work. So we do those long 5 to 7 minute releases. We do very drawn out fascial release in my clinic. That's another big piece of how we unwind the spinal cord after I do the NIS and some of the other stuff that I do. And then, we move in, we talk about, the active system, which is our muscles and tendons. They tether to bones. That's 60% of our force control, right? Muscles talk to glands talk to muscles. So I explain to the patient, look, your internal health is not separate from this structural stuff you're telling me that hurts, that you have pain. When you lose structural integrity and you can't handle force in different parts of your body, your brain tells you to experience pain, so that it tells you, hey, go and fix this, right? So we talk about the gland and the muscle picture, and I just say a gland, will give a silent scream through a muscle, and we'll see that where we have a loss of integrity and signaling to your muscles, where we have a loss of tone. And then I really spend a lot of times on emotional mental health, guys. I tell them, there's a saying in chiropractic, the spine is the back of the mind. If you're not in alignment in life with your mental, emotional health, you will not be in alignment, in your spine or your nervous system. And that encases all the subsystems. That will affect every layer of your nervous system. And then, guys, the passive system is the last thing I talk about, which is the vertebra and the discs and the joints. So I say, guys, the passive system is at the mercy of everything else I just discussed. So if those other parts of your nervous system aren't in balance and healthy and well, then you don't have structural integrity. Bones are just floating all day. Joints are just floating. So back to like my whole journey with chiropractic, I believe And this isn't, I'm not knocking out the chiropractors, because there are beautiful techniques where you can do manual adjusting and make big changes in the spine. But I believe to get more healing out of the individual on the table, that pushing a bone into place manually is a very, very, very weak way of doing that.
Well, it's a symptom reliever. And I think that's
It
what a
is.
lot of people come to doctors looking for, is they come for symptom relievers. And because I've actually had great value out of rack and crack when it first
Oh, so have
came.
I. That was my chiropractor growing up. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I was
So
an athlete. That was
but I
my
think,
journey. Yeah, I loved chiropractic. That's why I became a chiropractor. But I had a rack 'em crack 'em guy. But he kept me going as an athlete. I was functional. So again, it's great. But when people are really, really sick, it's not enough. And I'm
but
okay
it's
with
the questions
saying
that go deeper.
You
Yeah.
have
And
to go
those
deeper,
are
yeah.
the emotional issues. Yeah. That are really embedding. Because where does body store emotion? It stores it in the body.
Stores in the
know?
body.
Physical
Absolutely.
trauma. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's probably what you see all day long. And that's going back to the video, your muscle testing, and help our listeners understand muscle testing. Because I think I've known about it for about 15 years now. And I think it's probably one of the most unique things you can ever learn on how to read your own body.
So muscle response testing, it's been around for a while. And the basis of what we're doing is, and I explain this all the time, is we're looking for vulnerability in your nervous system. So what does that mean? Well, when we find a muscle that has integrity, you have strength there. There's good tone in that muscle. If we give a small amount of pressure to that muscle, there's resistance there. But it almost feels like a bungee when you're pushing. I'm not trying to overpower the patient on the table. It's not a strength-weakness contest, okay? What we're actually looking...
You really only need about 2 fingers to push down in terms of you're doing the arm.
You really only need 2 fingers, and there's a difference there. Some muscles will lose a little bit of tone, some will lose a lot. So when you get really sensitive to muscle testing, you can actually feel the tone difference depending on the circuitry that's blown in the body. That's one thing. So it's not always a 2-finger thing. Sometimes, depending on the individual, if he's a little more muscular, you're going to have to give a little bit more. And it really depends on the individual on the table. I use surrogates and self-testing a lot in my clinic because I have found that when you're using the patient a lot, it will distract from the answers sometimes. It slows things down because some patients are better at muscle testing than others. And I don't have time to train everybody on the table. And a lot of my patients just like to kick back when they come in. They don't want to sit there and be muscle testing me the whole time. We do verify everything on the table with them. As far as when something comes up and shows a signal loss, I'll use verification and test the muscle on the table with the patient. But to scan, I don't really sit there and sit and muscle test the patient over and over and over and over and over. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
and that's the old school way.
Yeah, it is the old school way. I get a lot of comments on my page where they're like, hey, what are you doing? Like, what's the purpose of the third person? And they're a surrogate. So I've trained, all of my CAs are trained to do pretty much everything that I do except for a chiropractic adjustment where they legally can't do that. But the reality is, like, I've trained them all how to do muscle response testing. I test them all how energy works. I take them through a 3-month deal when I hire them so that they can become very good muscle testers. And what we're testing, guys, is really just what's called an action potential. So when the body doesn't have a threshold of energy moving through the system, there's going to be a loss of action potential in that muscle. And so you can feel that change of tone. And so we're kind of working in this space between. So what I tell people is like, look, it's not a strength weakness thing. I'm just trying to see, like, do you have integrity when I push a little bit and there's their tone in that muscle? And if there's not...
It's like the ultimate lie detector test, honestly. Because I've had it happen to me, and with the first time you ever go through it, it's a freaky experience because you realize you can't lie to yourself. Once you know this trick, you realize that there's always a test that you can prove you're lying to yourself because your body has this very wild response to truth versus falsehood. It really does. It wants integrity.
And it's interesting because there's some people that they can't wrap their head around it. I don't get as many of those through the doors anymore, but in the past I would get people, they'd come in and like, they would just look at me during the assessment like, you're just pushing harder. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, and it's just too much. And so I don't focus on those people because I'm here for the people that get it and that understand what I do. And if you don't, then I'm not here to like convince you, right? It's just, it's gonna make sense to only so many people, right? And that's just with anything. So, I mean, we're
True
really
healing has to be comprehensive. Yeah,
right,
it has to be a give and take.
right.
You can treat the symptoms passively, right? You take
Mm-hmm.
the aspirin, you have the minor adjustment. That's a passive kind of process, but it will, even in a true hack, crack and what do you call it?
Rack and crack.
Rack and crack. That still takes a little bit of work as you relax to that whole process. But yeah, if you really want to get to that, you got to do the deep work on both sides, and it has to become an ongoing process. It's not a one point in time, right? So.
Absolutely. Well, and I wanted to just talk about, back to the muscle testing, and I'll give a little bit about this because I love the way that this is explained, was taught to me by Dr. Phillips. So he says, a muscle test is a sensory motor response. Okay, the brain is sensing and responding and simultaneously with motor control. So interruption to your nervous system will disrupt the action potential signal, causing the strength and control of the muscle to be depleted. So this is the beauty of this. A sensory motor response will remain strong when the brain is congruent or recognizing associated factors causing the stimulus. So this is the difference between a strong and a weak test. Now here's the thing. A blood test will determine a leukemia, but it doesn't explain why. An ultrasound will show evidence of a fibroid, but it doesn't show why. Depression symptoms become obvious. Biochemistry results don't explain why. An x-ray will demonstrate a congenital scoliosis, but it doesn't explain why. Does a muscle test explain why? No, but it does suggest that for some reason the brain is confused by virtue of a sensory motor indicator response, and this promotes need to determine why such an acknowledgement has arisen and what evidence has caused the aberration. So when we're doing muscle testing, we're not saying that the test is giving the why. The test is showing us the fault, which is showing us the system and the area of the systems and the parts in the body that aren't functioning properly together, of why we're having this basically dis-ease in the body, this imbalance in the body, this rhythm in the body. So that's the beauty of what we do when we're mapping the body and using this type of work is, again, we're not finding the why. I'm not saying it's the why, but it helps us determine an acknowledgement that there is an issue here and it correlates with this. And you can't get that with those other things, like I just said. A blood test won't tell you that. And guys, I look at blood all the time. I do functional medicine, okay? So I run hormone panels, I run Dutch panels, I run wellness, full blood functional panels. I mean, we do organic acid tests. I mean, I do imaging. I do all those things. But this stuff has to line up with what I'm seeing in those things so that I know where to go and where to address somebody's health. So it's really just, it's a blend of using the stuff I've learned with modern medicine, right? And then I'm using ancient wisdom and ancient healing tools, and we're blending them together because I've learned a lot from both. But they both offer healing for the body. And like you guys said, people don't understand that there's another energetic body. You're not just matter. And you have to look into this part of the body to find more answers for your healing.
Doctor, I'm going to ask you a question, and we can always edit this out if you don't feel it's appropriate.
Yeah.
What is your take on psychedelics in terms of their capacity to affect healing?
So, I'm a big advocate for plant medicine. So
Good.
I'm a huge advocate. So, I did a podcast with my buddy. We have our podcast, the Dr. Dad's podcast, and we did a really neat episode called Plant Medicines with a guy that basically helps organize, and he's kind of like the in-between guy that will send you to retreats all over the world, depending on like what experience or answers you're looking for. And he'll tell you, well, maybe look into this type of plant medicine, or you can do this over here on this retreat, and this is a good retreat for that. But he pushes a lot of corporate people to different retreats all over the world. And we got a lot into different types of plant medicines. We talked about psilocybin. I mean, we talked about ayahuasca. We got into all these different conversations. And I've met a lot of individuals that have been on those journeys. My good buddy that I do my podcast with, he's a naturopath. He's done ayahuasca, I think, at a retreat. And I've met people that have done psilocybin, and they've told me their experiences. And I'm a huge fan because I understand the neuroscience of what some of those things are doing. For example, psilocybin and what it does with our brain, and it lights our brain up and it makes more connections. And I've heard how people have completely had horrible addiction problems, completely came off of an addiction of over a decade in 2 days from doing these type of things. I've heard of people, same thing, massive depressive for multiple decades, and in one experience, just not being depressed anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, with what I do, you look at those types of medicines, absolutely. Because wherever healing is available, there is a process involved with plant medicines. And that's the biggest thing I always tell people is, look, they're not for recreation. There is an intention and a process that must be and a manifestation of what you want to get out of that medicine, right? And so there's a journey with each of these things. And if you choose to actually go down those roads, then you're choosing to take a journey, but there needs to be a massive amount of attention of why you're using that tool in nature because of what it provides for you, right? And then even after the process, there's an integration that's going to take place. And then there's a still process there of processing and integrating that experience so that you can make a positive change or whatever that growth and evolvement you want in your life, right? And, people, I went to a 3HO men's camp years back and we did Kundalini yoga to achieve this. I didn't have to do plant medicines. Me and my buddy did, we pretty much fasted all day long every day. We were doing like 5 Kriyas a day, about 4.5 to 5 hours of Kundalini yoga. We'd only eat once a day, and we did this for like 5 days straight. But by the end of the week, we had so much energy moving through us that we were having like out of body experiences with Kundalini yoga. It was incredible. And the big reason I'm bringing that up is you don't always need these medicines to achieve these types of things. There are other tools. There's breath work. There's yoga. There's other things that'll get you there, right? But the beauty, again, is there's a process. There is an intention and a willingness to go on a journey with those things to get something out of it.
I like that approach because I have a friend we had on our podcast, and he's been doing Ayurvedic meditation for 8 years, and I do transcendental meditation, right? So there's that place where you get to when you drop in for like that 15th minute and you just feel something amazing, and it's physiological. You can feel a place, and that we call it the unified field. But he had been doing this for so long that when he took psilocybin for the first time, he took a 5-gram dosage, which is a hero's dose, right? If you take 5 grams your first time, that's like, oh shit, you're going all in. And it was iterative for him. He said, not mind blowing, but just really kind of cool. And that's what happens when you're in that space. And even Alan Watts, he took acid one time, LSD 25, and he saw consciousness, he saw oneness with creation. But his analogy was, if you get the message, if you get a phone call from the divine and you get understanding of what that's like, you can hang up the phone, right? You don't need to keep calling. You got that. And that's what's so beautiful, I think, for a lot of people who maybe don't put the time or energy into, because it does take time and energy to develop these kinds of mental breath work practices, meditation, and to get into that. And it takes a lot of repetition. And sometimes I think this world needs to wake up faster, not to the level that Timothy Leary, where he says what happens when the Viet Cong put acid in the water supply, right? He talks about this in The Politics of Ecstasy. And it's like, fucking just relax, dude, enjoy the ride. It's like, that's great, but that's not really totally helpful, right? And so I think that we have to, this is as a doctor, as somebody, you look at all of the environment, you look at the patient themselves, you look at the symptoms and all what's going on, and then you kind of move in and you realize what could be the best kind of symbiotic way to make this thing better, So, but I'm glad you're open to that. Yeah.
Doctor, we got time for 2 more questions, Rich, so prep one. I want to ask you a question, Doctor. How has it changed you as a person, being a person of healing?
I think I have a lot of patients, and you have young patients that are teenagers, and they're starting to figure out what do I want to do. In your early 20s, some people still haven't figured that out. I fortunately knew, like in middle school, that this is what I wanted to do. But it's interesting, the view of what I thought that was going to look like, and the role I was going to play as a chiropractor, like how I was going to help those people. I knew I wanted to help people, but I chose chiropractic. But again, I just thought I was going to be like my chiropractor. I was going to just be high volume, just, turning them out, man, cracking spines, helping people, getting people well. And my journey with my wife and the way my practice has evolved and grown to like right now, present day, I wake up feeling so grateful and blessed that I have people that trust in us enough to walk through our doors and trust us in that space that we hold for them to help them. And I feel very honored that I get to even be in that space with them, because it's a very, 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 very important role to play for somebody to help guide them when they're suffering. And I have witnessed an immense amount of suffering, not just with my wife. I mean, I watched my mom suffer growing up with back problems and stuff, which is probably why I chose to be a chiropractor. But I've watched a lot of suffering in my life. And so to be in that space, to have people come in that are suffering and they're sitting in front of you and they're looking for help, I'm very grateful and blessed and honored to be able to be that person for them.
It's awesome.
That's awesome.
So Jonathan's probably going to ask how people can get in touch with you after we're done here. But in your mind, is there a book or a site? If you had a lot of different, you've alluded to Dr. Phillips, Dr. Brimhall, and a couple others. Is there a place where, if somebody in our audience is starting to get piqued, or they're trying to get interested and to get themselves into a better place, is there something, a resource that you'd, other than your site, which we'll talk about after this, is there a place that you'd recommend people go to where they could kind of dig in and kind of get a path to getting better, some good starting point to help them on this journey?
Interestingly enough, my default for that is Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. I usually tell people to go watch Rewired. So have you guys seen his Rewired series? So it's easy, right? Like, not everybody wants to read a book. Not everyone's going to listen to a podcast, but most people will watch the TV if I tell them to go watch the TV. And that series within the first episode will unlock a lot of things in your mind, and you will create understanding that will just start to cause a ripple effect of curiosity. And it's funny because I'll give that to a lot of people and it just opens the box. And these people just start to roll forward. It's beautiful to watch. Oh, it's beautiful to watch. And he's helping so many people globally, but to have that tool as a doctor to say, hey, go check out this guy's work right now, while you're coming into me, but just start diving into this stuff while we're working with you. And it's very powerful, very powerful.
It's kind of like going to the going to the sauna or the steam room before they come in and get a massage, right? Kind of get yourself assimilated and open up that consciousness a little bit to absorb it, right? I love it.
Absolutely.
Should our audience, there's a couple people that I can imagine. One is, I want to go directly to you, and please help us understand how people can find you. And then what if do you do coaching? Because I know coaching is a modality now that is very acceptable. Do you do that for people?
We do virtual. It just kind of depends on the client and the situation, but people have reached out to us, and we do virtual stuff. As far as people wanting to see me in the clinic coming from out of town, we do that as well. We do have the availability sometimes to schedule maybe 3 days in a row. One of the big things I'll share with people is I do a consult with you before. Healing is a process. It is not an event. So a lot of times with some of these cases, we're just trying to jumpstart some things. Maybe you go back home and have a practitioner there that can keep you going, because I help you find the root cause of where you need to focus. And then, I'm sorry, what was your other question, Jonathan?
Where would they go what would you recommend if they don't have the capacity to work directly with you?
So reach out to me on my Instagram. It's Wardy_Wellness. I get a lot of people every day from all over really the world that say, hey, can I find a practitioner that does what you do near me? I usually will get them hooked up with a directory. Sometimes I know a doctor in that area, and I'll point them to a doctor that's similar to what I do in that area. So I'm on there probably at least once a day checking, because I do all my social media stuff for the clinic. So I'll answer questions if anybody reaches out to me, has any questions. Just give me a message.
Awesome. Doctor, it's been an absolute fantastic episode. I know a lot about this stuff, and you've enlightened me in a wonderful way. I really appreciate it. And to all of our listeners, I always love these ones when we're talking about the body, because there's so much rich detail to the body and how we operate. To To all of our listeners, please comment, subscribe, and let us know if you have another guest. We've gotten a lot of really good recommendations, and we will see you next week. And if you're going into the weekend, have a great week, everybody. Much love.